Tonight I'm visiting my first apothecary, basically, where I grew up in my childhood, visiting my parents. You know, as Ram Dass says, if you think you're enlightened, spend a week with your family, right? Good one to think about. So I'm hanging with my family for the first time in about 8 months. So I've been traveling and coming back here to New Jersey and reacquainting with lots of good friends and family. And this is kind of my first apothecary, and I thought we'd just go through it a little bit because I have tons of books here and my altar. So I grew up basically on this altar, so it's nice to be back. There's still lots of beautiful things on it, including the snakes that a little special friend made. It was his first clay project. I don't know what to do with those. Lots of other good things. So what I thought I'd do is just break down some book recommendations, and I'll take you all through some. And basically the deal is, a lot of times people ask me, like, what's the best book? Like, I was at a class, you know, teaching yesterday, and somebody's like, well, what's the best book to get? And really, it's an unanswerable question, because there's basically, I think, 4 categories, right? There's foraging, there's herbalism, and then there's, let's say 3, plant identification. And none of those are really together, and if they were, it would be a huge giant book. And so often people ask me book recommendations or what are their favorite books. I do have a list on returntonature.us on the links section, and that's kind of a book list that a friend made from pictures I sent him of all these books. But I figured we go through it a little bit, and if anybody has any questions, you can feel free to ask. It's kind of fun. I was looking at some little things I had under here. This is where I stashed some stuff up. So, for example, I have some greater celandine. That's another amazing herb with not a lot of use. I've got some comfrey oil. Let's see what that is. Snowdrops, galanthus. That's a fun one. That's the leaves. And that's a pretty poisonous plant, but there's also a connection that galantamide, something like that, is really powerful for lucid dreaming, and nobody really consumes snowdrops. I've got Aurelia roots. I'm gonna make a root beer from that. Multiflora rose and oil. So I'm totally just seeing this stuff for the first time in a long while. Terrarium tincture, which we made at Bass River. Smell the comfrey. And so this was really fun. This was the first tincture that we had basically ceremony for a week in a cabin in the woods, me and a bunch of special friends. And then the last day when I was leaving, I just harvested every medicinal plant that I found, and I put it in one jar and poured alcohol over it. And it was reindeer lichen, a holly tree, right, an ilex species, pine sap, wintergreen, leaves and berries. I think that was it, and it was really cool because it was basically, it looked like a terrarium, and I didn't blend it down, it was just whole, so it was like this huge terrarium, and I let it sit for a month, and then it turned out to be incredibly potent. So I've got just a little batch of terrarium tincture here, and I haven't tasted that in a while. And we would always kind of dose it to remember the time at Bass River, where we basically stayed up and sang. Oh wow, super potent. That reindeer lichen is a really less commonly known plant, or I should say lichen, for antimicrobial properties. It has oostenic acid and things like that. So here's a look at basically the mess I'll call my first apothecary. And I've taken a lot of these herbs and brought them to the other apothecary that I built. But I have all kinds of fun stuff that I've harvested, like from all over the place. And it's kind of like my first foraging thing. So for example, this bee balm grew outside. It was like the first plant that I found that was medicinal. And we'll get to books in a second. And then I have a whole bunch of, ooh, what's this? That looks like some dank tea. Right, so I have reishi that I harvested. This is actually fernbird, tiny wolf moon. Sent me this so long ago. This is Brazilian pepper, and they're all over Florida, and I was like, oh shit, send me a box. So I've used those a ton. some turkey tail. This is actually puffballs that I roasted in the oven as a kind of powder that I haven't used. This is all lactarius mushrooms I got. This is probably like a year and a half old now, but they'd still be good. It's probably less old than what you find in the grocery store. Black trumpets, oh yeah, I definitely got to dig into those. I've got oyster mushrooms here, and some dried honey mushrooms there. So just a little bit of stash there, personal stash. And then basically this is a book list full of anything from gardening to nature skills to mushroom identification to kind of metaphysical aspects of plants to all kinds of things. So I thought I'd just kind of break it down, and let's see. Oh, thanks, friends. Yeah, black trumpets. I was looking for them today, actually, but no luck yet. It just poured 2 days ago. So basically, how do I start? Let's start with this. So foraging, right? One of the first foraging guides I actually bought was Wildman Steve Brill's book, Identifying and Harvesting Medicinal Plants. And that's a really awesome book. It's black and white, so it's really helpful. And I basically checked the list, on that, and I just went down every plant I could find. This is a super cool book. This is like what my mom had on the shelf back in the day. So the two books I kind of started with is this one and Michael Tierra's The Way of Herbs. That was just on my mom's shelf. And this is actually really helpful for cross-referencing different herbs as far as medicinal aspects and also contraindications. Here's a book all on the A to Z guide to herb-vitamin interactions. That's a cool one. And then, some fun things, Bill Mollison, permaculture. This is a great book, James Green, The Herbal Medicine Maker's Handbook. It's kind of a beginner to different medicine-making techniques. And then, in 2012, I went to India, so I was foraging all over India. And this is a great reference for plants of India in the Vedas, which I have a particular, interest and love for. And then, of course, Stephen Buhner's books are awesome. This is my favorite Buhner book. It's totally different than the others, The Lost Language of Plants. A lot of people read The Secret Teachings of Plants, which is nowhere near as intense as this one. This is definitely the one to get, as well as I'm read about half of this, Plant Intelligence and the Imaginal Realms. So if you haven't checked out Buhner's books, those are really kind of like the metaphysical aspects of an interaction with nature and the metaphysical aspects of herbalism, if that makes sense. As far as foraging, right, the Sam Thayer books are really awesome. And that's where, you're going to get a few plants. You're going to get a few plants out of that, but it's going to be very detailed as far as how to forage it. Now he's got 3 books, so Sam Thayer is an awesome author, and those are really helpful for foraging specific. Of course, Yule Gibbons, the original, kind of the same style, right? So this is about harvesting seafood, and actually it's all over New Jersey. He was from Pennsylvania, so it's some of the spots I've definitely been to. Tree Whispering, kind of getting into that metaphysical aspect. Homeopathic First Aid for Animals is a pretty cool book. Let's see here. Then I've got some mushroom identification guides. This is To Birds, a birding book. Audubon books are really amazing. Simon & Schuster's Guide to Mushrooms, that's a pretty good one. Mushrooms of Northeastern North America by George Barron. This is the other book my mom had on her shelf for years and years, Edible and Medicinal Plants and Herbs of the Peterson guides. And this one's really good. It's really cool. There's definitely a lot of like, oh, Native Americans use this like this, and Native Americans use this like that, which is interesting, insightful, and often incomplete. But then the Wild Food Guide from Peterson is not very good, and it's full of mistakes or like very abstract ideas. Like that's where people get the idea of using, what is it called? If you've ever heard Jack in the Pulpit root, people try to dehydrate that and use that for a food because it says in the Peterson Field Guide was used for food. It also says that skunk cabbage was used as a flour by native people, but it doesn't really tell you how it was prepared. So a lot of people have burned their mouth on both of those. And let's see what else we have here. Newcomb's is a pretty good wildflower guide. Of course, that's an old edition. Then we have, this book is awesome, Shelters, Shacks, and Shanties. This is all just like primitive shelters, how to build primitive everything. Yes, I want to do all that. Yes, please. Please that. Yeah, can we do that? Okay, who wants to build one of those? Just every page is super awesome. I might actually take this and put it in the van now. So that's a cool one. And then Tom Brown's books are totally amazing. So The Way of the Scout is a really intriguing and ridiculous book. And of course you'll read that and you'll want to be an environmental superhero. It's a really cool book. Then this is a really awesome one. Michael Harner, Hallucinogens and Shamanism. And this is a really cool book because actually this details some stories about datura and the witches' pastes. And it also has a lot of stuff on psilocybin mushrooms and kind of the origination of some old school ethnobotany. So ayahuasca ceremonies, visions and cures. And then I wanted to see the mushrooms of language, and that's all Maria Sabina influenced. Yeah, the role of hallucinogenic plants in European witchcraft. That is really where they talk a little bit about the witches' pastes. So that's a very hard topic to get into as far as doing research on. But that's a good one too, Michael Harner. Let's see what else we got here. So then I've got some tracking books, you know, some of my favorites. Field Guide to Tracking Animals in the Snow. Even if you're not in the snow, that's super helpful, that book. And then Tracking and the Art of Seeing by Paul Rosendazer. That's a really good one too. And then Tom Brown's Field Guide to Nature Observation and Tracking. Do I have any other tracking books? Let's see. Well, this is definitely part of that. Reading the Woods. This is such an awesome book as far as observation, really seeing nature in that kind of holistic perspective a little more. Let's see what else we have here. John Young, What the Robin Knows. His work is so awesome. If you haven't checked that out, you should do it. And then Rich Ochek's book, Making Plant Medicine, another really great one. You know, so James Green's book and Rich Ochek's book give you a pretty good basis for herbal medicine making and the little techniques there. Of course, tarot book. This is something that someone gave me that I haven't read, but maybe I'll take that one with me too. That's what I'm doing. I'm kind of now taking some of the stuff that I had here and I'll dump it in the van as long as it's organized. And then I'll have a bunch more books. This is actually a really great one. Just basically about how vitamin interactions work in the body. So there's a lot of good, insightful things. Again, Phyllis Bach is totally amazing. She wrote the other Prescription for Herbal Healing. So that's a good one. Let's see. Oh, I wanted to point out the Yule Gibbons books, right? Stalking the Wild Asparagus, Stalking the Healthful Herbs. Those are really great ones. Root River Perma, yeah. Like, basically, Tom Brown's books are the most ridiculously amazing thing you will ever read. And, of course, everybody goes back and forth as to what's true, what's not. I mean, The Way of the Scout is the most ridiculous book you will ever read. And so is Grandfather. And it's basically like Tom Brown as like a 10-year-old kid, like breaking into like environmental contamination sites and leaving notes saying we're watching you and scaring them out of the place. And like, it's just absolutely crazy, like environmental scout stuff. But, you know, scout skills are very important. Evasion techniques, all those kind of things are really important, especially if you think that the apocalypse is coming. Those are fun techniques. Hopefully you won't need them. But even if you're animal tracking or hunting, you know, those skills come in real handy. This one is such an insightful book. This is basically about the tea trade if you're interested in tea history. And this is basically about how Europe conquered China and India England through the tea trade, conquered China and Europe and China and India, and basically forced them into slave labor plantation. So there's some really interesting information in here, especially if you're interested in tea culture, tea drinking. That one's a really nice one, so check that out if you're interested. Let's see here. Obviously, this one is a classic, Thompson's and Bird, The Secret Life of Plants. You know, really cool sort of research that was going on in the 70s about plant sentience, plant intelligence, plant consciousness, things like that. And along with that, The Botany of Desire by Michael Pollan, they have that kind of synergy together in that way of helping you to kind of awaken yourself to realizing how alive plants are. So The Secret Life of Plants has all this, you know, Luther Burbank doing research on communicating with cacti to get them to grow less spines so that they can be, more edible. And then now in California, there's a Burbank variety which has less spines. He was doing a lot of sort of plant whispering. George Washington Carver was doing plant whispering, as far as trying to get different traits out of plants by intuition, observation, and communication. So really cool stuff in there. There's also a documentary which you can find on YouTube called The Secret Life of Plants, and Stevie Wonder does the soundtrack, and it's basically Stevie Wonder like singing his ass off about how awesome and magical plants are. So that gets taken off of YouTube a lot, but you can probably try to find that, The Secret Life of Plants. Totally amazing, insightful, all this research they did in Russia especially about the intelligence of plants. So Healing Teas is a nice little book for, the basics of different herbal teas and, what their medicinal aspects are about. Wow, bought this in India in 2012, Common Indian Wildflowers, when I was going around foraging there. So Ayurveda, got super into Ayurveda, so you'll see a bunch of Ayurvedic topics in here. Timothy Scott's book, Invasive Plant Medicine, really is an amazing book. What's up, Lauren Meowley? Meowley? I don't really know how to say your last name, but I just think of you as Lauren Marley. And yeah, The Secret Life of Plants is a totally awesome book. Must read for all you weirdos out there. Invasive Plant Medicine by Timothy Scott is a really cool one and really just shows all kinds of insightful research. He compiled a lot of research that was done about how medicinal so many invasive plants are. And that's really a good foundation for like a lot of the things I talk about, like in the morning. Morningly? Merely? I don't get it. In the morning. Merely. There we go. Oh, Maya Tuari is awesome. Yeah, I think I have one or two of her books. Anyway, I get distracted easy. So these are pretty cool books. This is actually Buhner's first edition of Herbal Antibiotics. Oh, Mary, I'll have to focus on that later. So distract. So this is Buhner's first book, Herbal Antibiotics. It's his first edition. It's pretty decent. And then, there's these nice little story books, STOREY, and so that one's on breathing. And it's just basically herbal protocols for breathing. And I also have one about digestion somewhere. One of my favorite books as far as primitive skills, pine needle basketry, super awesome. All about pine needle basket making. It's not very hard, just takes a little time. Let's see what else we have. So the Herbal Handbook by David Hoffman is a really good one. John Perkins' books are super awesome. Actually, I met an Ecuadorian today. Yeah, I've got some acorns there. Yeah, those are from last season, so they're basically preserved, right? So I just have to crack them and do the rest on that. John Perkins is basically an environmental activist working for indigenous rights. He's really amazing. He's definitely taken on big pharma. He's done a lot of work, and he wrote his experiences with the shuar in Ecuador, and those are pretty awesome. So here I go. Merlin Mearly, like Merlin Mearly. What? Wild Bruja, you prankster. So I use acorns for food. This is fat, carbs, and protein that doesn't run away. So you just have to crack those open. Sorry, we weren't even talking about like that. We were just acting crazy. No Lauren Marley, Mary Early. Oh no. So I just have to crack them open, throw them in a blender, put them in a jar, put cold water on them once they're ground up, and stir it, and then leave it overnight, dump the water out, stir it, leave it overnight, dump the water out, stir it, leave it overnight, do that 5 or 6 times, and then I'd have leached acorns, make super good bread. John Perkins, another book here, Spirit of the Shuar. So those are the Ecuadorian indigenous people. They do drink ayahuasca. They are also headhunters. So don't necessarily go down there trying to get off the plane and go find the shuar. They're pretty intense. So those are really good books. Svoboda is a great author, Robert Svoboda. So this is Prakriti. This is about your Ayurvedic constitution. And of course, Vasant Lad. I've read his stuff and gone to his workshops so many times. So this is a really nice basic book on Ayurveda, the science of self-healing. And then Tierra and K.P. Khalsa wrote a book called The Way of Ayurvedic Herbs, which is kind of like, it's Michael Tierra's deal, The Way of Herbs, and then this one's The Way of Ayurvedic Herbs. There's really awesome information in there. There's a little bit about basma, which is cool. Those are medicated ash. Sustainably Sam, hello. I feel like this really needs to be figured out. I can't focus because I want to know how to pronounce her last name. Oh my god. The pressure is on. The pressure is on. Well, I'll just talk as you all figure that out. The Andean Codex is a really amazing one about, ceremony in the high Andes with indigenous people. This is a really great book. James Duke, Medicinal and Useful Plants of the Upper Amazon. Of course, I was in Colombia doing an ethnobotany journey and drinking ayahuasca a couple of years ago, so really good resources there. This is a nice one, Mexico's Ancient and Native Remedies. This is all about, like, Mexican vegetalismo, things like that. Oh my god, should I get sucked in? I'm never going to be able to pronounce it. My southern mouth. Uh-oh. She's going to put a smackdown on all of us. It's not merely my middle initial is M, so it's Lauren M. Early. Oh shit, that makes so much more sense. Wild Bruja. Say the word Merlin and then just say then say Lee Merly. So say the word Merlin 5 times backwards, and then you can grant any wish that you would like. You guys are funny, you ladies. This is book porn, and I hope it's Early. Oh, Lauren M. Early. We figured it out, I think. So James Duke is an awesome author. He went down everywhere. I mean, he is an amazing ethnobotanist. So as a whole, like, basically my deepest roots go to Richard Evans Schultes, who wrote, let's see if I can even find it. I don't even know where that one went. Big books. Big ones. There's some more up there. Too much shadow. I don't know where that one is. Plants of the Gods, is that what his book is? I mean, McKenna wrote one called Food of the Gods, and his is Plants of the Gods. Richard Evans Schultes was basically the first ethnobotanist to start traveling and learning about the indigenous ways of people who work with psychedelic shamanism. And then that went from, the hippies in the 60s who were just basically stealing it and not understanding that the indigenous cultural aspects are very important. And then Richard Evans Schultes kind of led the way, and Jim Duke was definitely probably a part of that. I don't know if they were connected or not, but Jim Duke is an amazing author, writer. He just passed, I think, this year or last. He was in Maryland for all these years, so he was a huge influence. And Richard Evans Schultes gave kind of way to, first of all, Terence McKenna and Dennis McKenna would really owe a lot to Richard Evans Schultes, and that's where they got the idea to even go down to the jungle from one of his papers about ukuhe, which was a DMT, an edible DMT. And then you get Christian Rach, who's one of my favorite authors. All of his books are usually collaborative. This is one of his. He's a German. He studied under Richard Evans Schultes. Christian Rach is amazing, deep dude. So that's, source reading for India travels, shamanism and tantra in the Himalayas. And then I've got witchcraft medicine, and Wolf Storl is another green wizard. Excuse me, giant mushroom. Ganoderma applanatum off of a beach. It's pretty crazy because this beach fell, right? So the tree fell and the mushrooms changed directions. So you'll often find that little gravity switch. So witchcraft medicine is really cool, kind of European folklore, magical medicine. They're great authors. So that's Christian Rach, Wolf Storl, and Claudia Muller. And they have a lot of cool stuff in there. One of them is like the mugwort rituals that used to be done in Europe for Freya, things like that. Yeah, that mushroom. Oh wait, I have a phone call. Hello? Oh yeah, hello? Oh, you're medicinal? Oh, that's really good to know. Oh yeah, that's great. Here. Mushrooms talk to you. So James Duke's The Green Pharmacy. And then this is one of the best foraging books for cross-referencing. It's got no pictures, right? But it's the Encyclopedia of Edible Plants of North America by Francois Copeland. And this is so full of plants that nobody's ever heard of. And like, so basically you can see all the little tags in there I have. And those are all really incredible. As far as like really abstract plants that you have no other reference to is often in that book, and he talks a lot about indigenous edibility in there. So that's a really cool one. Of course, Paul Stamets, a superhero. Paul Stamets for president any day. And what Mark Shepard as the head of the Department of Agriculture, maybe Jane Goodall as vice president. You know, we can get it going. Those are the people who should be leading the country and the world. Kind of drop the ball on that. But Mycelium Running is really just a profound writing about how mushrooms can save the world. And if you haven't seen 6 Ways Mushrooms Can Save the World by Paul Stamets on his TED Talk is absolutely incredible. Really amazing stuff. This is how I learned a lot of Indian cooking right here. Indian Vegetarian Cooking by Jack Santamaria. Of course, his last name is a marijuana reference. We knew that. John McPhee, The Pine Barrens, such an awesome book that really got me inspired to travel all around the Pine Barrens. You know, so my first entry into Jersey was Beard Fest, and I went to the Pine Barrens, and I was scarfing blueberries and wading in the Mullica River, and I'll be getting back there in a couple weeks to harvest as many blueberries as I can, and maybe suicide by blueberry will happen if I am successful. I'll probably eat like 20 pounds of blueberries a day. I'll try to take some back. Sandor Katz's first book is totally awesome. The Revolution Will Not Be Microwave. This is like a manifesto for the new revolution. That's really cool as far as sort of the cottage industry revolution. Let's see what else is here. Of course, the Medicine Card book. Oh, man, getting old school. Really good for understanding animal sightings and their meanings. Vasant Lad's book, The Secret of the Pulse. This is pretty good. It's kind of hard to learn pulse reading from a book, but there's some tips in there, and you know, I've learned from him directly more, and then it makes a little more sense. But if you just read that book, it's going to be pretty tricky. Now, these are totally awesome. This is like kind of Carlos Castaneda, you know, India style, and this guy was super deep into this like Kali old school cult. And he definitely talks about some crazy magical witchcraft. You can see that book, that cover right there. So that's pretty much what the whole thing is like. And he's got 2 of those. The other one is called Kali's Odia. The Herbal Drugstore, I really haven't read at all. I would imagine this is kind of like that book, you know, Natural Remedies They Don't Want You to Know About or something. I haven't even really cracked this open, so I'm not really sure what it's about. Found its way to me somehow or another. Build Your Own Earth Oven. Those are cool for building cob. The Finhorn Garden is also a really cool book. This is actually Jaya's. Whoops. Should give that back one day. This is basically a story about how, you know, this Findhorn group, and if you've ever heard of Sirius Eco Village in Massachusetts, they're kind of built on the Findhorn model. And this is basically, they realized that the plants had a plant deva, or a plant spirit behind them, and they would actually talk to and channel the plant spirits, and they told them where to plant them, and they actually won all these like gardening awards, and people were totally blown away by them in the day. So that started a kind of eco-village on plant whispering, so to speak. Of course, I have a whole selection of native education, right? This is a great book. Gift of Power. Of course, you know, what many indigenous people say is these are all post-Christian. So this is like Christianized indigenous Lakota wisdom for whatever that's worth. Of course, Arthur Haynes. Yeah, Ancestral Plants. Really nice as far as primitive skills, edibility, things like that. The Biology of Plants. If you've ever seen, I'll probably post it at some point, but there's this really amazing image of a little sapling and then this huge mycelial network under it. And so there's some really cool biology in there. That was like a high school biology book. This is also a really cool one if you're interested in sort of paleohistory and things like that, geology and fossils, things like that, really getting deep. Then Buhner's, oh, this is actually Wolf Storell's book on healing Lyme naturally. It's pretty good, except I'm not a big fan of how he's just like, oh yeah, just take Teasel, and he kind of got a little shit from that. But he's got some really interesting insights to the sort of cultural phenomena of Lyme, and some insights as far as its message as a organism. So there's some really insightful things in there, but don't think that Teasel alone is going to heal Lyme disease. That's totally a little dangerous of sorts, but that's not exactly what he says in the book. So read it yourself. Don't think that Teasel is the only option or the only possibility. Buhner's book, Herbal Antibiotics, it's pretty good. I mean, everything in there is pretty short and self-explanatory, but a lot of options, a lot of good things. So if you're into pandemic herbalism, such as myself, that's a really good one. Of course, Carlos Castaneda books. You know, I basically dropped out of high school and smoked marijuana and played guitar and read Carlos Castaneda books until I found a band. And so, you know, for whatever it's worth, not everything is true in there, probably. Carlos Castaneda was probably a bullshitter on a lot of levels. He made some stuff up. People called him out on all kinds of levels. But there's some really insightful things in those books. And I slowly, when I read them, I realized that, oh, that's sorcery, and I was looking more for shamanism. And basically the difference is that sorcery is about power for yourself, and shamanism is about understanding that the power has nothing to do with me. So that's kind of the idea there. But Castaneda has got some really weird and interesting stuff, and has introduced the world to Datura for better or for worse. His stories in there are crazy. Oh, wow. I forgot about this one. I might take that with me too. This is a real insightful book about taking care of children in very intuitive ways. That was a gift. That was a gift from some lady I used to know. The Herbal Alchemist Handbook. This is a great little reference. There's some astrological aspects, so if you're interested in connecting plants and alchemy, there's some good things in there. Rituals, all kinds of good stuff. So check that one out. Herbs and Foods of the Zodiac, another cool one, right? Just a little reference. So each, it also talks about the cell salts in here, so which sign needs which cell salt. So that's a very interesting thing. I'll probably take that too. Gonna need more shelf space. This is the most esoteric deep book I found in India, and this is all about making bhasma, or ash, right? Medicinal ash. We don't really know very much about that. That's an alchemical technique. These are actually recipes in here for making it. So that's pretty deep stuff. So names of silver in different languages, right? And then it talks all about silver bhasma, right, which is a silver ash preparation. If you're interested in looking at that, there's another YouTube documentary, Ayurveda Art of Being, and that's a really insightful thing. Oh yeah, Leo, roar. So that's really insightful. If you want Ayurveda Art of Being, you can see actually how they're making bhasma. They make metallic ash. So in alchemy, you start out with a plant path, and then you make the plant stone, and then you work on minerals, and you make a mineral stone, and then you work with metals, which are much more dangerous, and that's how you make the philosopher's stone. So this is a lot of metal work in South India still happening. They're purifying mercury, lead, silver, you know, pretty much anything that they can get their hands on. They're doing all these rituals to make medicines, which they think are extremely potentized. This is also a really great one for really translating the Vedic knowledge and the medicines in there and trying to understand which the species are that they reference in the Vedas. Of course, Soma is the first rite, basically, that we have. So that's a cool one if you're interested in Soma. I've also got a webinar on my website, returntonature.us, where I talk a bunch about Soma and kind of yoga and Ayurveda and the Vedic knowledge, how that all ties together. Robert Bartlett is an awesome author for Real Alchemy. This is a great book, so if you're into alchemy, check that one out. Where should we go next? Should we go into like yoga philosophy, or should we go into more plant craziness? I guess we'll finish the plant craziness. This a friend gave me. That's incredible. There's also totally just abstract books in there, references to certain plants which you'd never think are psychoactive, and that's again Christian Rach, who I mentioned before, and that's got a lot of interesting insight in there. There's Plants of the Gods by Schultes. Let's see what else we got here. Tim Wilkerson, one of my alchemy teachers, that's his book. Shulgin's stuff I'm not really into. Somebody gave me this for free. I'll probably never crack them. I don't really care about synthetic drugs, so to speak. There's Buhner's second edition of Healing Lyme. Now, the weird thing about it is he's got 2 editions. Basically, this is what it comes down to. This one, he wrote for medical doctors. It's so terse. It's so hard to get through. It's so detailed as far as biopathways and all this stuff like that, which is super cool. I mean, you know, he blew it up as far as like, don't mess with me, I'm an herbalist, but I know what I'm talking about. I'm looking for his other one. But the first edition is much easier. So when I had Lyme in 2010, I got the Healing Lyme first edition, and that was really helpful to get me with a foot in the door. And so that's much more basic understanding. This one is like incredibly detailed, but also pretty chilling and also very insightful if you flip through and read the chapters that you want to read and not all the medical stuff. Hey, Mellow Kendall. Yeah, Plants of the Gods. That is really your foundation for ethnobotany and indigenous medicine ways. Try to get that without books falling on my head. One of my favorites, I mean, I probably got this book when I was like 19 or 20, now 35. So I've been I mean, that's how I came into all this, like Terence McKenna and ethnobotany and psychedelics and, you know, trying to figure out what plants were psychedelic in my neighborhood, of course. And that's not only because I wanted to take them, but I was interested in really learning about these kind of taboo things. And then especially Datura was one of the first plants I found, Datura stramonium, and I was just like, wow, this is the most beautiful thing I've ever seen. And then the smell, I was like, that's the most intoxicating smell I've ever found. And that really got me interested. Not as a tripster, you know, I can count on my hands how many times I've taken psychedelics, but you know, really as a person who's trying to understand the indigenous practices and how those all tie together. Nutmeg Honeybug says, did I completely heal Lyme? I don't really use the words curing or healing. I believe that the body heals itself and the herbs are the support of that. I've gotten over 45 deer tick bites and I'm still standing and I feel pretty good. I don't have chronic inflammation or a lot of pain. I treat the bite. I treat the internally when I get a bite, and I try to prevent like heck, and I take lots and lots of herbs. If you're interested more in that, I mean, I have tons of info. I've been posting all about Lyme for like a month straight, and so you can check that out. There's herbal protocols, there's philosophy and theory of Lyme, and all kinds of stuff like that. So then these are just a whole bunch of books here, which I haven't gotten super into. These have all come from different places. Oh, this is like one of my favorite books, honestly. If anybody struggles with your art, read that book. It's not The Art of War by Sun Tzu, right? It's this really basic writing on how to overcome the self-critic. It really helped me when I was 18, 19, a guitar player, trying to really, you know, play music for my whole life. And this is just about finding your muse and really getting into that. So really good one, very insightful, kind of a self-help book. Let's see what else we have here. So a lot of Jyotish, right, Ayurvedic astrology, and then Indian Lonely Planet guides. This is a fun one. Animals and Psychedelics. You can see where my head's at. So this is all about, Giorgio Samarino wrote a book about which animals seek intoxication. So this is a really insightful look at animals who purposefully seek to intoxicate themselves. Really kind of a cool short read. Oh my God, I haven't been here in like 8 months, so I didn't even remember what's here. This book changed my life. That really just opened up a lot of understanding about what happened in the counterculture, how the government was definitely behind the LSD craze. So that's like gets into MK Ultra and all kinds of crazy shit in there. So if you're interested in scaring the crap out of yourself and feeling like Big Brother is watching you, Big Brother is watching us watch ourselves. So that's a good one too. And then, you know, my grandma got me all into cool metaphysical stuff, so aura reading. This is all about J.B. Ryan. This is another one. If you want to go there, combine that with that one. And this is all about research that the government was doing in the 60s and 70s. J.B. Ryan was the head of the, what is it called? The metaphysical research, right, in the government. And so his whole book here is all about like how they were using telepathy and remote viewing and things like that for problem solving in the government, in the military. So, yep, aren't you shocked? And then just a couple good ones. Of course, Jim Morrison's books. Oh yeah, his poetry books. Listen to the Doors today. This is one of my favorites. Meeting the Shadow by Connie Zweig. This is so important as far as really humanizing and normalizing, you know, a lot of these so-called gurus and mystics and things like that. Just really kind of bringing out how to work with the shadow and really breaking through on those kind of things. So really a beautiful, very important read. You know, of course, you know, I talk about working with the shadow a lot. Aura reading title. Hey, Moonance Wildcraft. Oh, reading how to read the aura. This is just like some like Barnes & Noble book that I was into when I was like 17. Yeah, looks fun. I read some of it. Yeah, and then I'll just show you all the rest of these. I can't keep pulling them down, otherwise I'll never get through this. So astrology stuff, different cultural stuff, Don Juan books, Theta Healing. Carolyn Miss is an awesome writer. Of course, DMT, the spirit molecule, kind of broke out a lot of our lethargy. You know, Rick Strassman was really influential in making actually psychedelic research happen again. You know, now it's happening a lot. Oh yeah, Egypt, Gods, Myths, and Religions. You know, those big table books, all kinds of fun stuff in there. Carve your own totem pole. I mean, who the hell doesn't want to do that? Making gourd musical instruments? Come on, carve your own totem poles, people. Of course, Led Zeppelin, and yes, tablature books, birthday book, Taurus book. Happen to be a Taurus. Can you tell? Alright, so that's basically that side of the room. The Egypt one is just like Egypt, you know, one of those table books. Lucia Garden. But then these are cool too. This is The Gods of the Egyptians are two really cool books by Budge. And those are really into, you know, all the deities and kind of their meanings and information and the stories around them. So let's see what we have on this side. Now we'll get into kind of like yoga and tantra philosophy. I've been studying lots and lots of years, very interested in tying all this together. If you've ever been in my classes, you probably have heard some sort of yoga philosophy hidden as just looking at plants. So this is a nice, insightful one. This is Ram Puri, who basically lived in the Juna Akara, which is one of the sadhu sects in India. So they're the charas, smoking, dreadlocked wearing sadhus, and that's a book basically of his experiences with them. The Rig Veda, a little copy of the Rig Veda. I love these books, the Bihar books, right? They all have the 3 lines. These are really helpful. This is chanting. This is about, you know, practice, getting nearer to God. Dynamics of yoga, and this is Tattva Shuddhi. And that is about the purification of the elements, and tattvas are elements, and shuddha is purification. So that's really cool. There's a lot of different, if you've ever heard of Bhuta Shuddhi, which is chanting the chakra sounds, Ram, Vam, Ram, Yam, Hum, Om, that's all in there. This is like one of my toys. Oh yeah. Do you know how many times I've done that in my life? When he shoots sparks out of his mouth. That was good times. Chanting. This is a really amazing book for for understanding karma, right? So there's actually 3 types of karmas. That's really oversimplified in our Western culture. So we think karma is what happens to you, but actually there are 3 types of karma. Sanchita Kriyamana, and one other one. And if you want to know more, read the book. That's Tigunite, Tigunait. And this is just a beautiful book talking, just about how to thread together kind of the before death state, the life state, and then the after death state. So really insightful. And then, of course, Svoboda wrote these crazy ass books, right? Agora 2, and Agora 3. And the Agoris are the sects that are known to like meditate on dead bodies and eat human flesh and drink alcohol and do everything you're not supposed to do as a yogi. So those are really insightful, a lot of philosophy in there, really insightful things. Totally crazy, totally nuts. Watch out with those books. This is a good basic to yoga, Hatha Yoga. Oh, the Karma book name, From Death to Birth by Pandit Rajmani Tigunite. And he's still alive, and he's the head of the Himalayan Institute. So you can go visit him if you'd like. But Burley has this really nice book, all about Hatha Yoga. You've got your asana, pranayama, bandhas, all these kinds of things in there. So basically a primer. Of course, Arthur Avalon is the person who was in British occupied Calcutta in maybe the 20s and 30s, and he got initiated into Tantra, and he actually started translating all the tantric texts and publishing it, and they really hated him for it. But this is a lot of just basic tantric texts in English with no Sanskrit. So it's really insightful to get a understanding of how the rituals go. If you've ever been to an Indian temple and you see the puja and you have no idea what they're doing and what's going on, it's actually no fun that way. And then this can give you some insight as to what the rituals are like. And if you combine that with, just go on Devi Mandir's website, what's that, Shreema, SHREEMAA.org, they'll teach you the similar pujas that Sir John Woodruff or Arthur Avalon was translating. So they'll show you how it's done and teach you there. That's actually them right there before becoming this. Atharva Veda, the Upanishads. This is a really good book. This was the first Upanishad book I got, so these are all wonderful stories, very educational, insightful. Iswaran. Then here's a whole bunch of wonderful books. The Bhagavad Gita. Witch's Heel is really interesting. This is kind of like a wise woman tradition. This is kind of famous for abortifacient section, which I won't recommend for or against. But there's a lot of herbs for abortion, herbal abortion in there. So she's kind of a radical. She's like the radical Susan Weed. Lakota Belief and Ritual is a great book. This by Walker. Yoga Nidra, potent stuff. More Sir John Woodruff. This is a really great one. If you're interested in tantric alchemy, right, and even physical alchemy, right, in the Indian tradition, these are the Siddhas, so those are the immortal Siddhas, and Boganathara was one of them. He's actually known as possibly Lao Tzu. There's a connection that he wrote the Tao Te Ching, but of course he's got his gold bars, because gold is the philosopher's stone, right? And this is really insightful, a lot of Kundalini teachings, tantric teachings, chakra teachings, all in the form of poems. And then all these, just lots and lots of stuff. Touched by Fire, that's a good one. Tigunite wrote that as well, and that's his experiences hanging out with saints in India. Tantra Unveiled is also his book. Very simple books on Tantra. These are really nice if you're into it. This is an old school book, Studies in the Tantras and the Veda, MP Pandit, but it's actually pretty insightful. A lot of good things there. And then you can just look at the rest of them. Lots of yoga books. Yoga Vashishta is totally amazing. Very crazy, difficult philosophy. Takes a lot of reading and rereading and re-understanding. Yoga Sutras of Patanjali, of course. You need a good translation. And so that's pretty much the yoga, tantra, and semi-tantric alchemy section. Then up here, just have a couple more. And of course, Man and His Symbols by Carl Jung totally blew my mind when I was like, I don't know, 15, 16, 17. And Psychedelic Shamanism is a good book. That one is by Jim DeCorn. And then Herbs of the Northern Shaman, that's another good one, just about like, very abstract psychedelics, not the big ones, but like all the nutmeg and all that crazy weird stuff. And then just some more books over there, stuff. Recite Iliad, right? Images and Symbols. His books are incredible. He wrote one called Shamanism, the Archaic Techniques of Ecstasy. That's a really good one. And that's pretty much it. Is some books to start checking out. I have a whole bunch of them on my website, returntonature.us, in the book list. So if you want a visual look at them, I mean, they're not all there, but a friend was kind enough to share it. I got that one. Weston LaBar, The Peyote Cult. This is really insightful. That's about the birth of the Native American church. Essentially, the peyote eating, the Tarahumara, the Huichol, all the Mexican culture down there. So that's pretty much it. Lots of herbs. Catnip, elderberry, linden, lemon balm. Who's this? Dandelion. Fennel. Then lots of mushrooms, other things. And that's pretty much it. And then I've got all kinds of fun things. These actually came from a church. This is what they burn on Palm Sunday. And they make the ash for Ash Wednesday out of. So there was some extra. My aunt gave me extra from her church. Figured why not. And then I'll also show you the most magnificent, ridiculous staff that I saved because my friend was going to burn it. Oh my God. Might knock the whole world over. So this is a pretty good one. If I walked down the street in that, I'm sure I'd get in trouble. But that thing's pretty hardcore. If you walk around your neighborhood in this, you'll probably get busted by the cops. But that's a fun little staff. He was going to burn it. I actually saved it from being burned because I thought it was so great. And I want to put a crystal on the top. I'll show you. Where is it? So imagine if like this thing was sticking out of there. Oh yeah. One day, one day. Oh, I've got a couple more chanting books if anybody's interested. Chanting yoga. Don't break things. Not in NYC, no one would bat an eye. That's true. If somebody was in NYC, that would be totally fine. Let's see what else we got here. So Swami Satyananda, great teacher, as I mentioned him before, he writes puja books. So if you want to learn chanting, those are some of the best ones to do. This is Bhagavad Gita by one of my yoga teachers who I spent a lot of time with, Swami Amarnathananda. He's just the local monk here down the street. When I first started looking for, monks and stuff, especially Brooklyn, yeah, I'll totally fit in there. So there's his translation, and then Devi Chand does like very detailed translations of the Vedas themselves. The Atharva Veda is known as the fourth Veda. So the Atharva Veda is about worldly magic. It is charms and incantations for doing physical healing. The first three Vedas are not about physical healing. So this is a really interesting look at how the Vedas gave way to Ayurveda and Tantra. So this is kind of where the tantric rituals start coming from. And it's a really amazing insight. It's very dry, very weird stuff though. Very, very weird stuff. Like they used to have mantras for curing jaundice, right? So they would basically be like, I command you, jaundice, to leave this body and enter the sky now. Like totally like that. But this was like a 1,000-year period in India. So you would think that if none of it worked, they would quickly think that it was all bullshit. So the fact that it lasted approximately 1,000 years in India, to me, tells that there's probably more to it than we assume. I'll pull it out because worth checking out. I mean, not very often somebody's going to start busting this stuff out. As heaven and earth are not afraid, and never suffer loss or harm, even so my spirit fear not thou. As day and night are not afraid, nor ever suffer loss or harm, even so my spirit fear not thou. As sun and moon are not afraid, nor ever suffer harm or loss, even though my spirit fear not thou. So of course when they were chanting Sanskrit, it would have a melody, but it would also be understood, just like this English is. Let's see what else we got here. Guard, O heaven and earth, by granting me full power of hearing. See? This is a nice prayer. Guard me from death, inhaling and exhaling. This is well said. See, they're commenting on their own comment. O Son, guard me by granting me the power of sight. This is a nice prayer. O God, the leader of all, preserve me through all learned persons. This is a nice prayer. O all sustainer, preserve me with thy power of nourishing. I dedicate myself to thee. So you have to understand, this is like probably, 4,000 or 5,000 years old. This is what people were doing all day, 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. And some of these are extremely very detailed towards healing certain ailments. So this whole book is basically like medical herbalism part 1, as far as super old school, like seeing, how we think that now germs exist and we think germs are so real. Well, in this day and age, they thought spirits were germs, essentially. We think there's a big difference. Like, there's nothing called a germ. Germs don't even exist. Germs are not real. Never seen a germ. That's a metaphysical concept that our medical industry is trapped in. And it's not really different than seeing it as energies or spiritual forces. And so, cooties, germs and cooties, it's the same thing. And so this is, O God, gladdener of the universe, like the moon, with thy refuge, grant him who hates us. There's a lot of very, so that he, look at this, grant him who hates us or whom we do not love light so that he may abandon hatred. So this is prayers towards people who dislike you. O God, the gladdener of the universe, like the moon, with thy passionate power, make him who hates us or whom we do not love sober and non-violent. Look at that. That's pretty powerful. So there's just, mantra and mantra and mantra and mantra and mantra on these prayers and these hymns towards the different deities of the Sanskrit tradition, and then also different physical ailments. And then the secret decoder ring for that, these beings, right? So let's see, I have here, look, prayers on semen, right? Increasing semen. And then 36 and 37, let's see if that's pages. Mantras for healing the patient. Let's see here. So when they were doing their healing, right, even if it was herbalism, right, they start chanting these things. Let's see. O soul in bondage, he creates different sorts of aids for healing the ailments. Attain to purity through the help of the great physician. For the family sickness, poverty, domestic calamity, malice, and God's punishment for sin, do I free and save thee. I render thee sinless through the knowledge of the Vedas. May both the earth and the heaven be auspicious to thee. O sickness-stricken person, may fire with the waters be gracious to thee. Let the sun and the moon with herbs be kind to thee. From family sickness, poverty, domestic calamity, malice, and God's punishment for sin, do I free and save thee. I render the sinless through the knowledge of the Vedas. May both the earth and heaven be auspicious to thee. O patient, may kind wind with the atmosphere prolong thy age. To thee may heaven's four quarters be auspicious. From family sickness, poverty, domestic calamity, malice, and God's punishment for sin, do I free and save thee. I render thee sinless through the knowledge of the Vedas. May both earth and heaven be auspicious to thee. So this is like invocation towards your patient, right? So imagine if you start chanting that over your herbal tea. Those are the kind of things that people were doing for thousands of years, and that was really a part of the traditions. So Instagram is going to give me the boot in a minute and 50 seconds. I hope y'all enjoyed this. I finally am going to have some solid internet access, so we'll do more stuff like this. You're healed. Perfect. See, that shit works. It only works if you do it in Sanskrit, though. And you know the right meter and the right intonation. Just kidding. It all works because we're magic, but that's only a part of it. And the physical and the matter and the energy, right, are one. That's what Albert Einstein was trying to do, right? You equate matter and energy, right? So the energy of thought and the physicality of the plant matter go together in synergy, and that's holistic herbalism. So I hope you enjoyed checking out some books and sending you all lots of love, and we'll be in touch soon. Peace, friends.